Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jessica, and I will be joined momentarily by our senior analyst, Kenneth. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP. Welcome to the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network's Top 25 rankings, where we take a different approach to evaluating the best teams in college football. Unlike traditional polls, our rankings are fluid and adapt each week based on the most current data. We assess every key aspect of a team's performance, going beyond just wins and losses. We start by looking at power rankings and strength of schedule, not just for the games already played, but also for the tough matchups looming ahead. Then, we break down each team across all three phases of the game: offense, defense, and special teams. For special teams, we dig deep into the kicking game, analyzing field goals, punting, and even the impact of kickoff and punt returns. These often overlooked plays can change the course of a game, and we make sure they get the attention they deserve. On offense and defense, it's not just about how many points are scored or allowed. We focus on how effective, efficient, and explosive a team is. We evaluate their ability to move the ball, make critical stops, and create big plays. Whether it's marching down the field with precision or generating game-changing defensive stands, we look at the numbers that truly matter. This isn't just another top 25 list. It's a comprehensive, data-driven analysis that reflects the complexities and nuances of college football. So, buckle up as we dive into this week's rankings and break down the teams that are making waves.
And good evening, everyone, and welcome into the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, week 2 of our Crunch Time Sports Advantage college football playoff rankings. A little bit different what we've done in the past, where we just did our top 25, how we looked at a team overall. Great job by the ladies, really kind of setting the table for me. So, Jennifer, great job with the video. Jessica, great job hosting as always. Senior analyst and founder of the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, Kenneth here. Before we get started, want to send a very special salute to all of my former and current brothers and sisters serving in our armed forces, regardless of what branch that you may have or may still be serving in. Want to send a special thank you to each and every one of you, because you are the best of the best. Okay, so let's get into it. We talked about it last week. If you're watching on YouTube or streaming this live on Twitter, what we have up on the screen again is the mission statement from the College Football Playoff Committee and what they're charged with doing in selecting these teams. And we're just going to touch really quickly on some of those. Strength of schedule is a big component. Head-to-head competition is also a big component. Comparative outcome of common opponents without incentivizing margin of victory. So if you beat a team by 14 and your upcoming opponent beat that same opponent by 40, that's not going to weigh into the committee's decision. Also, we'll touch on it again, but if your team is missing key players and or coaches, that may affect your team's performance during the season will likely affect your postseason performance. That will also be taken into account. So just wanted to refresh that for you before we jump into how we stack up the top 25 as far as how our committee would look into it. And without any further ado, let's get right into it. And checking in at number 25, out of the American Conference, out of the great state of Louisiana, in a city I know well, New Orleans, it is the Tulane Green Wave. We've kind of been tracking this team for a few weeks now, and they've been on the rise as far as the way we evaluate teams. So we could not be surprised that they would find their way into our top 25 this week as far as the college football playoff committee goes for the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network here. So checking in at number 25 with an 8-2 record is the Tulane Green Wave out of the American Conference. Checking in at number 24 out of the Big 12, sitting there with a 7-2 record, Coach Prime and that Colorado Buffalo team, coming off of a very hard-fought win last weekend as they were able to get it done on the road in Lubbock against Texas Tech. And folks, Colorado was down in the first half 13-0 before reeling off 41 points. Texas Tech made that score look a little bit closer. So our data took all of that into account. Colorado was in control for most of this game, but it wasn't a start to finish dominating performance by Colorado. That's why we didn't see the Buffaloes move up any further in our playoff rankings there. Checking in at number 23, out of, we're just going to call them the independent Pac-2, and that is the Washington State Cougars, pardon me. This team checks in 8-1, fresh off of a 49-28 win over Utah State. A very solid performance. I wouldn't call it completely dominating, but they looked the part, Washington State. And if they were in a better situation from a conference standpoint, we might be talking about this team as a potential college football playoff team. But I think that getting into the top 20 probably is going to be their ceiling, which is going to leave them well short of a at-large bid for the Washington State Cougars. Checking in at number 22, a team that has absolutely seen the wheels come off the last couple of weeks, and that is the Iowa State Cyclones, 7-2. Another loss here in back-to-back weeks. And folks, Kansas, Rock Chalk Jayhawk KU put it on Iowa State early and often in that ball game. Folks, this game was a complete domination. It took 16 points in the fourth quarter for Iowa State to make this look respectable. But if you look at the first half, 31-13, this game was over in Kansas very early. And that's why we've seen Iowa State really take a nosedive from where we had them last week to where they currently sit this week. I'll touch on some revisions that we made to how we beefed up the model as far as how we selected our top 25 as far as the college football playoff committee go. So I'll touch on that once we get through the entire list. But Iowa State sitting there at 22 and could very easily find themselves out of this top 25 come next week. Checking in at number 21 out of the Sun Belt, the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana. They sit there with an 8-1 record. And this team has really been solid over the past few weeks. And if you're not paying attention, you can easily miss out on just the quality of football that the Raging Cajuns are playing right now. They thumped Arkansas State 55-19. This was a game that we put on the podcast last week. Was wondering if Louisiana would come out flat in this ball game. Well, they answered that in the first half, 31-6, and put this game away. Good job there for Louisiana and continued success there. All you need to do is have a couple of things happen, break your way, and you could be in line for a magical season there, Louisiana. All right, checking in at number 20. The Wildcats of Kansas State out of the Big 12. This team sits with a 7-2 record. And if I look, I believe K-State, before I speak on that real quick, that's right, K-State coming off of their bye, so holding steady there at the 20 spot. Need to start putting together some wins here to close out the season if they want to get back into the hunt and get to a Big 12 championship. Checking in at number 19, the Bengal Tigers out of Louisiana State. That's right, LSU. Major nosedive here in the poll, and just absolutely getting thumped at home by Alabama. I said that this was a loser leave town match. I think the loser just left town. LSU sits there with a 6-3 record. 2 of those losses have now come in the conference. That other loss, you got to go all the way back to the beginning of the year. They're in Allegiant Stadium when they lost to USC. That loss is not aging well at all. So LSU, there is a lot of tiebreaker scenarios, but right now, you're not really winning any of them. You lost to Bama head-to-head. That is not going to probably help you if we get down to the 5th and 6th tiebreaker in the Southeastern Conference. So LSU, you need to close out the season strong and just hope some things fall your way. Checking in at number 18 out of the Atlantic Coast Conference, that is the Clemson Tigers. And Clemson absolutely starting to kind of round themselves into shape. They go into Lane Stadium, into Blacksburg, Virginia, and get a 24-14 win over Virginia Tech. Clemson sits right now in a very prime position to make their way to the ACC title game as they sit 6-1 in conference. We'll talk about the team that was the presumptive favorite there in the ACC and how that result last week affected the entire conference. So Clemson, 7-2 record, sitting there right now for us at number 18. Checking in at number 17 for us, 6-3, South Carolina. Talked about this one briefly on the pod, how South Carolina was really catching a really wounded Vanderbilt Commodore team, but all credit goes to Coach Shane Beamer and for getting that win on the road. There's no shame in getting a very convincing win on the road as they were able to get past Vanderbilt 28-7. Just a sluggish performance by both teams. Weather played a little bit of an impact, but I'm not going to say it was the overarching factor in that ball game. It was just a dominating performance by South Carolina's defense, as well as a very beat up Vanderbilt offensive team. So credit to South Carolina for absolutely getting the job done there. Staying in the Southeastern Conference at number 16, fresh off of their bye week, is the Texas A&M Aggies. The Aggies sit there with a 7-2 record. We know their first loss coming against Notre Dame back in the opening weekend. And then, of course, that loss to the team that we just mentioned, South Carolina, just a couple of weeks ago. A&M sitting still in a very solid spot to make the SEC title game. Kind of got to make some things happen going down the stretch to get out of some of those tiebreakers, but you still have a chance. And at this point in the season, all you want is a chance. So South Carolina sitting there with, Texas A&M 7-2 in a really good spot there. Checking in at number 15, the Black Knights of Army out of the American Conference. This is the second team out of the American Conference that we're talking about here. So there's a solid possibility that these two teams could face off there for the American Conference Championship game. We'll see how the rest of the schedule plays out, but that's something to keep in mind there. Army 9-0 on the season. We know what awaits the Black Knights coming up here really soon on the calendar, but that game only matters if you continue to win games, and credit Army for absolutely getting it done this past weekend. And when we look at it, there were serious doubts about what their quarterback Daly be able to go. That young man absolutely gutted it out. 36 carries from their quarterback, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns on the road against North Texas. And folks, they had a drive for the ages back in the third quarter. I think it was 21 plays eating up over, I want to say 12 minutes of game clock and just grinding out that win against North Texas. If you had the under, you were sitting there pretty, but had to sweat that game out if you had Army to cover that ball game. It wasn't until they got that late touchdown in the fourth quarter that really sealed it. So kind of a mixed bag of results there. But as far as the rankings, Army sitting in the catbird seat right now with that number 15 ranking. Just ahead of them in one spot is Boise State out of the Mountain West. And right now, Boise State is our highest rated group of 5 team right now, sitting there with an 8-1 record. Their only loss by just a couple of points to Oregon is really the difference between them being ahead of Army right now. So that's something to keep an eye on, is who is going to be the highest rated group of 5 champion, because as we know, the highest group of 5 rated champion does get that automatic bid into the college football playoffs. Checking in at number 13, the Mustangs of Southern Methodist University. That's right, SMU, 8-1 on the season out of the Atlantic Coast Conference. SMU sitting in a very beautiful seat to make the ACC title game. If you take a look at their schedule, folks, this is why we're starting to kind of think that SMU could be a live player in this thing to get to the college football playoffs. But SMU, you must continue to take care of business each and every week. The object is always to go 1-0. You need to make sure you continue to do that each and every week. Checking in at number 12, fresh off of an absolute thumping in Oxford, Mississippi. A surprise to most, not a surprise to us. Folks, going into that game last week, we had Ole Miss as a 5-point favorite, not a 2-point underdog in that ball game. We felt good about it. We took it, and it absolutely paid off for us. Had Ole Miss capitalized early on, instead of kicking those field goals and were able to convert those into touchdowns, instead of a 28-10 win, you're now talking about a 42-10 win. But credit Lane Kiffin for taking the points like he needed to, something that we've been talking about for the past year and a half with Coach Kiffin. Glad he finally listened. Big time win for him, big time win for Ole Miss, kept their playoff hopes alive. And right now, alive is a very good thing in the college football playoffs. Georgia, on the other hand, we continue to see this team struggle and struggle and struggle when it comes to taking care of the ball. This is more than just a Carson Beck problem. This is a issue that ball security is just not being valued nearly as much at Georgia as it needs to be. Again, 3 turnovers in the ball game. Hard to win games when you're evenly matched and you can't run the ball and you're turning it over. 2 things that are not going to bode well. Georgia, you have a big game coming up this weekend, and it's against the next team I'm about to talk about out of the Southeastern Conference. Checking in at number 11, 8-1 on the season. That is the Tennessee Volunteers. We know the Vols are off of a 33-14 win at home in Neyland over Mississippi State. Did have a little bit of injury concern from 3 of their top players. Thornton, the wide receiver, got nicked up in that game a little bit. He's going to be fine coming up for the Georgia game. Dylan Sampson briefly left the game against Mississippi State. He came back in, broke off a long run as he looked to have shaken off whatever that injury was, ending that game with 30 carries, 149 yards, 1 touchdown. Finally, Coach Heupel listened to us and realized that the best player on that offense is Dylan Sampson, got him involved early, and you saw this team was able to put 20 points on the board in the first half, something that they haven't done in quite some time. You got to go back several weeks for Tennessee to put up any points in the first half. Quarterback Nico got knocked out of that game, I want to say either before the half or right afterwards, was kept out of that game, went into concussion protocol, and just got an update here a couple of hours ago before we're recording this. He is going to be fine. They really kept him out for precautionary reasons. Great job there by the Tennessee medical staff and getting him ready for that big showcase showdown against the University of Georgia. That game is in Athens. That game will be on the big show this coming up Wednesday. All right, let's get into the top 10 here. And checking in at number 10 is the Penn State Nittany Lions out of the Big Ten. We know their only loss coming at home against Ohio State just a couple of weekends ago. Penn State probably sitting in the best position right now that they could possibly be sitting in. Not a lot of meat left on that bone. As long as they take care of business, they should find themselves as a player coming up once the regular season is over with. And Penn State coming off of a very convincing 35-6 win over the Washington Huskies. Got up early in that game. We thought there may be some hangover effect with Penn State. They absolutely put that to bed early. 28-0 going into the half. Really cruised to a very comfortable win there by 29 points over new conference foe, the Washington Huskies. All right, let's move on to number 9. And this team took a massive drop this week. And that is the Miami Hurricanes out of the Atlantic Coast Conference. 9-1 on the season. Folks, we got Saturday kicked off with a big-time upset there in Atlanta, Georgia. My good friend Julie Voss, you hear me talking about her and my good friend Matlock on their show, Matlock and Loaded, Monday through Friday, 8:50. The Ticket. You can always check out their show. My friends do a fantastic job. Julie Voss had this game on upset alert, and trust me when I say this lady knows what she's talking about. Good job there, Julie Voss. And good job by Georgia Tech. Did not let Miami get out to an early lead, kept that crowd engaged there at Bobby Dodd Stadium, and getting a big-time turnover of Cam Ward to really kind of close that game out, running back. Instead of scoring, he was able to slide down inbounds, allowing Georgia Tech to take a couple of knees and get out of there with a big-time upset over previously undefeated Miami. What does this mean for the ACC? What does this mean for Miami as far as making the playoffs? We'll touch on that here in just a few minutes. Checking in at number 8, and you want to talk about a rivalry on steroids. That is BYU checking in with a 9-0 record. And folks, that 22-21 win over in-state rival Utah had it all. Utah 21-10 lead at the halftime, did not score another point in that ball game. I know people are going to talk about some of the controversial plays there at the end of the ball game. My understanding has always been you don't ever leave it up to a referee decision to determine the outcome of the game. If Utah puts any points on the board in the second half, they win this ball game. And we're not talking about BYU as an undefeated team. That did not take place. BYU, you're sitting there right now in a very solid position. Just continue to take care of business. We may be seeing you for the Big 12 championship game coming up here in about a month or so. Checking in at number 7 is America's team, the Indiana Hoosiers. Coach Cignetti, I have said that we can shut it down. You are the coach of the year nationally, and if you're not, we need to absolutely destroy that award, because the job that you have done your first year at Indiana, only their first 10-win season, and by the way, they're 10-0. Coach Nettie, your press conference were right. We're 10-0, not bad. Get ready. You got a bye week coming up this weekend, and then 2 weeks from now, you got your showcase showdown, your resume building game. Right now, because of that strength of schedule, we can't really put you any higher than 7th right now. Continue to take care of business, though you may find yourselves in the college football playoffs. Checking in at number 5, Hotty Toddy, my Gotti Almighty. What a win there for Coach Kiffin there against the Georgia Bulldogs. We've been talking about it. This team and this program needed a statement game and a statement win. Boy, did they get that in Oxford. Just an absolutely beautiful defensive performance, one that would have made Coach Kiffin's late father, Monty Kiffin, absolutely proud of the way that Ole Miss defense stood up and took notice. Speaking of Ole Miss, want to give a shout out to my good friends there at the Rebel Walk. They do a fantastic job each and every week breaking down everything Ole Miss football. Want to say hello to some special ladies that are big time fans of the Rebels. Miss Patty, Miss Kathy, Miss Donna, Miss Ashley. Thank you, ladies, for all of your support as always. You ladies absolutely mean the world to me, and cannot thank you for all the encouragement and support that you've given us since we started this thing. The best is still yet to come. Could be saying the same thing about your Ole Miss Rebels as they sit there with an 8-2 record, 4-2 in the conference. Now, Ole Miss, you need to continue to take care of business. No more playing with your food and monkeying around, getting slapped around with wet towels. Close this thing out. We may have a spot for you later on in the college football selection show. Checking in at number 5, you want to talk about a performance, the Alabama Crimson Tide. There's a reason why they call Tiger Stadium Bryant-Denny West when the Alabama Crimson Tide come to town. Folks, Alabama has a better winning percentage in Baton Rouge than the LSU Tigers. Think about that for a moment. Folks, this game was over early. Alabama gets out to a 21-6 lead going into the break. They close it, unlike the game against Georgia several weeks ago, matched that 21 in the first half with 21 in the second half, gave up a very cosmetic touchdown at the end of that ball game. Our numbers absolutely took into account the game control that Alabama had from start to finish in this ball game. That's why Alabama sits with a number 5 spot for us with that 7-2 record. Alabama looking very good coming off of their bye. Need to close out the schedule and continue to take care of business each and every week. Checking in at number 4 is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And you want to talk about absolutely boat racing your opponent. That's what Notre Dame did to Florida State there in South Bend. 52-3 rip. Florida State scores 3 points in the first quarter. Did not put up another single point the rest of the ball game. Notre Dame was dominant in all 3 phases of the ball game and absolutely left no doubt, as one team has their arrow pointing up and one clearly has their arrow pointing down. Congratulations, Marcus Freeman. You sit there with an 8-1 record. We'll talk about your prospective forecast coming up here in just a few minutes. Checking in at number 3, the Longhorns of Texas. We told you when we did this show last week that Texas was going to be an outlier for us, where we had them initially at 16. They made the jump to 3. Now, we made some corrections to our data based on what we saw from the playoff committee. Now, it's not that we followed the playoff committee. We just wanted to see what they would put a bigger value on. Our data, once it was updated, absolutely spit out Texas with that 8-1 record as the 3rd best team right now as far as our college football playoff rankings go. Texas coming off of a very sound victory there against the Florida Gators at home. We know the Gators are absolutely battered, bruised, and beaten, but Texas get that win 49-17 and really 35 to rip at the end of the first half. Florida got some cosmetic points there in the second half. Our numbers, like I said, once again, took into account that the game script, the game control was firmly on the side of the Longhorns, and that's why we saw their resume get beefed up just a little bit more. Folks, 1 and 2 are out of the Big Ten, and there's no surprise which order they're going to be in. Checking in at number 2 is the Ohio State Buckeyes. I want to say a quick hello to my good friends Amber Holly and, of course, Miss Lindsay. Some of the best Buckeye fans, along with Heather, some of the best Buckeye fans that you'll ever find. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know all of those ladies, and they're absolutely wonderful. Your Buckeyes, as I said a few weeks ago, as long as you continue to win, you were going to find yourself in a very good spot. Your only loss coming on the road by 1 point to the Oregon Ducks, not being held against you. And honestly, we didn't think that the numbers were going to go against you either. So good job there by Ohio State. Continue to play complimentary football. You got some things you got to work on, but as long as you continue to take care of business and no slip-ups before that Indiana game. I know it's against Northwestern next weekend, but don't be looking ahead. Take care of business. Ryan Day, keep your team focused. You got a chance here to not only just make the college football playoffs, you could be going in as the Big Ten champion. But right now, all roads lead through Eugene, Oregon. Quack, quack. My good friend Megan, and of course her beautiful little daughter, love those Ducks. Oregon coming off of a very convincing 39-18 win over Maryland, pushing their record also to 10-0, 7-0 in the conference. Basically have locked up their bid to go to the Big Ten championship game as their first year being in the Big Ten. Credit to head coach Dan Lanning and that fantastic staff there. 21-10 lead over Maryland at the half, and really just added on a little bit of cake at the end of that ball game. So congratulations to the Oregon Ducks there, as they were able to take care of business. All right, folks, that's our top 25 as far as how we would stack them up as far as the college football playoff rankings go. Got a few questions that came into us, and let's go ahead and get into those right now. And the first question was, why is Penn State ranked ahead of Tennessee and Georgia? Really, it comes down to the respect that the data has for the Big Ten Conference, as I talked about it. While the SEC is deeper than the Big Ten as far as quality teams, right now, if you look at it, 4 of our top 10 right now are in the Big Ten, with 3 of the SEC being in the top 10. So that strength of conference is really helping out Penn State right now. And that narrow loss to Ohio State is really not really damaging Penn State right now. We know that Texas and Georgia will be playing against each other coming up this weekend. We will see how the winner of that game may leapfrog Penn State coming up next week. But we'll get to that next week. The next question: why is Indiana undefeated behind both Ole Miss and Alabama, despite both of those teams both having 2 losses? This is a real easy answer. It is all about the strength of schedule. Indiana has absolutely looked dominant, except for that game last weekend against Michigan. But for the majority of the season, Indiana has absolutely been dominant. It's the lack of quality opponents for Indiana that's really holding them back. We talked about that last week. We'll talk about it again. This team will have one chance in the regular season to have a statement win that comes up in 2 weeks when they take on Ohio State. And the final question: what was my biggest surprise about this week's rankings? I would say my biggest surprise would be that the margin that separates Georgia and SMU is a lot closer than I thought it would be. If I'm looking at this correctly, I'm looking at SMU being 0.3 of a point behind Georgia right now. So, what does that mean? If you're SMU and you can get to the ACC championship game, I don't think you'll get a playoff spot, but you would set yourself up to be in contention for that playoff spot. And speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about the biggest winners and biggest losers from this past weekend. The biggest loser has to be the Atlantic Coast Conference. Losing Miami from the ranks of the unbeaten absolutely will damage this conference as far as being able to get 2 teams in. I said it last week, and I'll reconfirm that here. Had Miami gone to the ACC title game and lost to a 1-loss SMU, you could have made a very strong case that both teams could have gotten into the playoffs. SMU being the ACC champion, Miami being a very good 1-loss team there. So that's going to absolutely cripple the ACC as far as getting 2 teams in. Another big loser for me this weekend has to be it has to be the Georgia Bulldogs. Right now, the Georgia Bulldogs would not make the college football playoffs based on our rankings. And I know you said, wait a minute, they're 12th. They're still a line from Lee Corso, not so fast. Remember, the highest rated group of 5 champion is guaranteed a slot in the playoffs. Right now, that would be Boise State, who sits at 14. So really you have to look at, okay, the top 11 making the college football playoffs. Right now, that would leave Tennessee in as the last team to get a bid. Georgia would be just still a line from March Madness. Georgia would be one of the first 4 out, along with, let's say in this scenario, SMU, Army, and Texas A&M. Those would be the next 4 out. So Penn State, we know the playoff committee is going to have you a little bit higher than what we have you at. I think last week the committee had you at 6. We have you right now at 10. We did move you up a few spots, but still you're sitting right there on the cutoff. So Penn State cannot afford any slip ups for the rest of the year. Biggest winner has to be Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame, the highest that they could possibly hope to be is the 5th seed because they cannot be a conference champion. Right now, I'll stick with my prediction from last week. The winner of the Big Ten championship game, whether it's Oregon, Ohio State, or even Indiana at the moment, that would probably be the number 1 overall seed, as we talked about. The SEC champion will be the number 2 seed. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. If BYU wins the Big 12, they're likely the 3 seed. The 4 seed gets a little bit interesting. I want to see when the committee brings out their rankings, what is the gap between Miami and or SMU versus Boise State? If they have Miami a little bit further down than what we have them, we already saw last weekend that Boise State was number 12 and SMU was 13. So I'm really going to be curious to see where they place Miami this week after that loss to Georgia Tech, and considering how Miami has played for a majority of this season. So that is going to be the biggest thing that I'm going to be looking for when the committee releases their latest playoff rankings. Another big-time winner, Alabama and Ole Miss. Now, I was already high on Bama, so was the committee. The committee had them at number 11. Ole Miss last weekend for the committee was 16. I think you're going to see a major jump for both of those teams this week. Would not be surprised if Alabama is ahead of a couple of teams. Wouldn't even be surprised if they jump Tennessee there at 7. Just going to foreshadow that. Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss is going to make a significant jump. Would not be surprised if Ole Miss, at the worst case scenario, I think Ole Miss will be 12. I'm curious also to see how far Georgia drops. I'm expecting a drop. I don't know how severe, but I am definitely expecting a drop there. Now, something we still like to do, and we like to talk about our regular top 25, and that is how we judge your team overall. And that, as Jessica did a great job of talking about in the lead up, is we look at your overall team, your offense, your defense, your special teams, your strength of schedule, some other analytic numbers that I've built into it to really truly evaluate how solid and how strong your team is and how well they've played throughout the year. And I'll run through this list really quickly. Once again, if you're watching on YouTube or streaming this on Twitter, you can see the rankings on the screen. For those of you listening on the podcast, thank you. Please rate, subscribe, and review to our podcast so you can get that notification whenever we have a new show ready to rock and roll for you. So let's run through this list really quickly. Texas A&M checks in at number 25. Tulane checks in at number 24. James Madison checks in at number 23. Checking in at number 22 is Kansas State. Coming in at number 21, that's where we find the Pitt Panthers. Ooh, they've had a rough go here over the past couple of weeks. Checking in at number 20, the Running Rebels of UNLV out of the Mountain West. Coming in at 19, Washington State, followed by Clemson, Louisiana sitting at 17, Iowa State at 16, Ole Miss at 15. Georgia took a significant tumble down to 14, Boise State at 13, SMU at 12, Alabama at 11. Army is all the way up to 10, like what we've seen out of Army. Checking in at number 9, Penn State, Tennessee at number 8, followed by Miami, Notre Dame, and BYU, checking in at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is Ohio State, followed by Texas at number 3, America's team in Indiana, number 2, and quack, quack, the Oregon Ducks coming in at number 1. Let's take a look at our top 25 teams in action this weekend. And this is brought to you by the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. Let's take a look. Number 5, BYU will play host to Rock Chalk Jayhawk KU. Kansas, coming off of that big-time win, will take their show on the road to Provo as they will take on BYU. Tony Elliott and Virginia head to South Bend to take on number 6, Notre Dame. Boston College will head down to the Metroplex as they take on number 12, SMU. In our showcase showdown, the Matlock and Julie Valves balls to the wall game of the week. Number 8, Tennessee heads down to Athens to take on number 14, Georgia. This is truly, again, another loser leave town match. The Bearcats of Cincinnati will head to Ames, Iowa to take on number 16, Iowa State. The Jaguars out of South Alabama, they're in beautiful Mobile, Alabama. Looks like they're going to head across a couple of state lines there to face number 17, the Raging Cajuns of Louisiana. San Diego State heads to the City of Lights, where they will take on number 20, UNLV. In another matchup of top 20 teams, number 18, Clemson heads up to the Steel City to take on number 21, the Pitt Panthers. Arizona State will head to the Little Apple as they will face the Wildcats of Kansas State. Stepping out of conference, Texas A&M will host New Mexico State. Number 1, Oregon will head to Jump Around Madison, Wisconsin to take on the Badgers of Wisconsin. Number 3, Texas will head over to Fayetteville to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Number 4, Ohio State, and what better not be a look-ahead spot there, will take on the Wildcats of Northwestern. Number 9, Penn State will head to face a very, very disappointing Purdue Boilermakers team. Number 13, Boise State will face off against San Jose State in a game that we're going to put on the big show. Find this game a little bit interesting, and as you know, around these parts, we do like interesting. Number 19, Washington State heads down south a little bit to take on New Mexico. Number 23, James Madison will face rival Old Dominion. And then finally, number 24, Tulane will head up to Annapolis to take on the midshipmen of Navy. Let's take a look at the teams on bye this week. Number 2, Indiana is on a bye this week. So too is number 7, Miami. And boy, do they need it after this past weekend. Number 10, Army is also on a bye. And fresh off of that win against Georgia, number 15, Ole Miss is on a bye. Number 11, Alabama will step out of D1 competition to take on FCS team Mercer. Bama will look to play their starters in a very limited stretch there, as they got 2 more conference games coming up to close out the season. So Alabama, take care of business. And folks, that is our show for the evening. Want to say thank you for watching and or listening to this week's show, week 2 of our Crunch Time Sports Advantage College Football Playoff show. Also want to give you a little bit of still how we see these teams stack up from 1 to 25. On behalf of my fantastic team here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, our talented and lovely co-hosts, Jessica and Summer, our senior handicapping analyst, Billy, who is already crunching numbers, literally crunching numbers, getting ready for the big show. This is Kenneth, senior analyst and founder of the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, wishing you all a great rest of your week. We'll see you on the big show on Wednesday. And as always, everyone, God bless. Thank you.